recreational marijuana is simply not what North Dakota needs. If you read and analyze Measure 3 as it is written, you will understand that if it were to pass, it would make North Dakota the most liberal state for regulation and control of marijuana in the nation. In fact, there would be no regulation and no control. We are certain this is not what the voters of North Dakota want. Consider these few key points as you think about how you vote on measure number 3 if this measure passes. It will not be against the law to drive while impaired by marijuana. Laws prohibiting smoking in public places would not apply to the smoking of marijuana. People will be able to smoke marijuana in restaurants, stores, churches, public buildings, anywhere. We do not want this to be allowed. Now, why do we say this about driving and smoking? Because Measure 3 creates a brand new law, a supremacy clause. It says that it has supremacy over all of the laws. This is what the last section of Measure 3 says, and I quote, 660103, Statement of Supremacy. In the event of the existence of any language in the North Dakota Century Code which conflicts with this chapter, those sections are hereby repealed and nullified. Impossible, but that's what it says. Neglect and endangerment laws prohibiting the smoking of marijuana in the presence of a child would be repealed. Zoning laws would not apply. Therefore, marijuana could be grown, processed, and sold in any quantity without regard to this activity being near schools, playgrounds, churches, hospitals, and neighborhoods. There will be no limit on the amount of marijuana a person can possess. This measure makes no mention of any special tax. Therefore, the sale of marijuana would be only subject to the normal sales tax. This is not a big money measure, and it's as a new source of dollars for the state treasury, as its proponents might contend. There would be no restrictions on growing marijuana. Anyone can grow it as much as they want, any place they want to grow it. This flawed measure does not establish the regulatory framework for the distribution of marijuana. This means there would be no rules. There's no rules because nothing's going to be against the law. Everything's going to be allowed. It's going to be wonderful, wide open territory. The Wild West.
In addition to all of the problems that have come about in those states that have legalized marijuana, this will create problems in North Dakota that are unheard of even in those states. Because what it does, in addition to legalizing marijuana, is repeal every other statute on the books regulating the sale, the distribution, the manufacture of marijuana. Those are all gone. That includes the zoning restrictions. So anybody can grow marijuana anywhere they want. There's no restrictions on where you can utilize it, so you can smoke it in public buildings, though you can't smoke tobacco in those same places. It is a real problem for schools that will see an increasing use of marijuana among their children and that they're trying to teach, the students who are coming to class. Parents ought to be exceedingly concerned because the availability of marijuana will be virtually unrestricted, and it's already difficult to control the distribution of marijuana to our minors. This will increase many-fold the problems that we've seen with that. It repeals the statutes that make it illegal to drive while impaired, and any other law that is in conflict with this measure is nullified under the terms of the statute. So this isn't just about legalizing marijuana. This actually creates a statute that would have to be enforced, and it will create problems that in years to come just about everybody will regret.
As law enforcement officers, we take an oath to protect the public we serve. And this measure will severely hamper our ability to do this. You know, so many people look at us as law enforcement, they say, oh, it's just because you just want to throw people in jail. You just want to make arrests. And I think we've proven over the years with how we support inmate reform, how we support addiction recovery efforts, that that is not the case. That is not what we're trying to do here. Our job is to protect our public. You just heard Judge Wefald talk about the impact on DUI driving. That should scare everyone and anyone that listens or reads this measure. Our ability to protect the public is our number one reason for existence. And this would make it very hard for us to do this. The impact to law enforcement will be huge. Our task forces, our narcotics task forces will be severely impacted. Our canines, the ability for our canines and the impact to law enforcement to retrain every canine in the state would be severely impacted. Our ability to investigate drug-impaired driving Because how do we know if somebody isn't exhibiting an alcohol-based type of driving behavior? Are they under the influence of a legal drug, marijuana? Or are they under the influence of something like methamphetamine or heroin? And how can we investigate a legal drug, which is going to bring us to an illegal conclusion? It severely hampers our ability to protect. There's this massive, I think, misunderstanding that all these people are sitting behind the walls of local jails or the prison population are there because of marijuana offenses. And what I'm going to do, I can only speak for Cass County. I can't speak for other jails, and I can't speak for the state of North Dakota. But I can tell you this past year we had 9,383 bookings at the Cass County Jail. Of them, 704 were booked one or more times on a marijuana offense. I want to make sure I get this right here. 154 people booked only on offenses that would be legal under the new law. 154 out of 9,383 bookings.
First and foremost, as a law enforcement officer, Measure 3 contradicts our oath of law enforcement to uphold the rule of law, because marijuana remains illegal under federal law, no matter what happens regarding this measure. Other things that are concerning to us are increased criminal activity that happened. I've done research and been to trainings throughout other states about what other states have experienced when this happens. And the amount of crime that happens just skyrockets. And the judge, he gave out great information about what has happened throughout communities, but I have some other examples from research that I have done and information that has been provided to me. Boulder Police, for instance, reports 54% increase in citations for public consumption of marijuana since legalization. Alaska and Oregon also are seeing dramatic spikes in criminal activity since legalization. But one of the main things that are really important to me is, what is this going to do to our youth? And the judge has addressed that. But consider these facts. The average rate of marijuana use by teens is 30% higher in states where marijuana is legalized than the U.S. rate as a whole. Almost 1/3 of all 18 to 25-year-olds in legal states used marijuana in the last month, up from 1/5 10 years ago. Law enforcement in other states where marijuana is legal are responding to increased complaints from schools for illegal use and possession of marijuana. Schools are experiencing an increase in the suspensions due to marijuana use. And an example, in Anchorage, Alaska, suspensions grew 141% from 2015 to 2017. 2015 is when legalization was implemented. Now, the judge touched on no penalties for drug driving, but here's some statistics from Colorado and Washington. Impaired driving fatalities have more than doubled. In Colorado in 2016, 73% of the 4,000 drivers charged with driving under the influence tested positive for marijuana. In Washington, 1 in 5 drivers are under the influence of marijuana, up from 1 in 10 prior to legalization. Now, how can this affect North Dakota? For the first time in 18 years, North Dakota has experienced a decline in traffic fatalities. We don't want this to end. We want this to be going down. We don't want it coming back up again.
The Greater North Dakota Chamber's top concerns with this measure are that for any industry that relies on a drug-free workplace, whether it's healthcare, energy, manufacturing, or transportation, this measure and the legalization of recreational marijuana will only serve to make our existing workforce shortage worse. And in other states where this has been legalized, such as Colorado and Washington, we've seen the number of employer drug-failed work tests nearly double. And that's something we can't afford to happen in North Dakota when our unemployment rate is only at 2.6% and we have over 14,000 unfilled jobs already.